I should have known something was off when my mom called out of nowhere and said, "We're doing a small dinner this weekend, just family. It would mean a lot if you came." Now, my family doesn't just ask me to be places. Not unless it's about my younger sister, Ivy. Still, a stupid little part of me hoped maybe this time would be different. Maybe, for once, they actually wanted me there, so I said yes. Saturday evening, I showed up at the restaurant they picked. As soon as I stepped inside, my stomach did a slow, sour turn. The place was decked out with balloons, streamers, a massive congratulations Ivy sign hanging over a long, fully packed table. So much for small. I scanned the table. Everyone was there, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, laughing, drinking, eating appetizers. Not a single chair left. Not even a stool. Not even a spot at the end where I could awkwardly squeeze in. That's when Ivy turned, looked right at me with that smug little twist of a smile, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh wow, didn't think you'd actually show up." Laughter followed. From her, from someone down the table. I couldn't tell who. I didn't care. I looked at my mom. "There's nowhere for me to sit?" I asked. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. We weren't sure if you'd come," she mumbled. And just like that, everything snapped into focus. Ivy leaned back, sipping her fancy drink like this was her throne. "It's a family thing," she added, with that fake innocent shrug. "Figured you'd skip it like always." I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. I could have said a lot of things right then. Could have thrown it all out on the table. The years of favoritism, the emotional whiplash, the constant, invisible daughter treatment. But I didn't. I just said, "Okay," turned around, and walked out. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet exit. The only sound was my heels clicking against the tile, and they didn't call. Not that night, not even the next morning. But sometime in the early afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It was both of them, my mom and dad, standing on my porch, with awkward expressions and tight little smiles. "We need to talk," my mom said. I raised a brow. "About what?" "Can we come in?" she asked, like this was just another Sunday visit. I paused. Let them squirm a second longer. Then I stepped aside. Not because I wanted them there, but because I wanted to see what this was really about. They walked in like they owned the place, sat on the couch like it was theirs. Didn't even wait to be invited. My dad stayed standing, rubbing his forehead like this conversation was already exhausting him. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and said, "Well?" My mom forced a smile. "About last night." Here it comes, I thought. Maybe they'd finally apologize. "We're hoping you can help cover the cost," she said. I blinked. "What?" "The dinner," she clarified. "It ended up being more expensive than expected." I stared. "You're asking me to pay for a dinner I wasn't even welcome at?" Dad cleared his throat. "You've been doing well lately, right?" We thought, maybe you could pitch in. I let out a short, joyless laugh. "You didn't save me a chair. You told me I wasn't really part of it. And now you want my wallet?" "It's not the whole amount," my mom said quickly. "Just a few hundred. That's nothing for someone like you." "How much did it cost?" I asked flatly. $2,500, she said, like she was reporting the weather. "But we're only asking for a part." I looked between them. "And why exactly is this my responsibility?" "Because," she said, tilting her head, "you didn't help in any other way." I clenched my jaw. "You paid for Ivy's college," I said. "You helped her get her first apartment. You still help her with rent sometimes." "I did everything alone. You told me," and I quote, "You'll manage." Mom rolled her eyes. "You did manage. That's why we figured you could afford it." My hands curled into fists. "So let me get this straight. I'm the backup plan, the emotional afterthought. But when the check comes, suddenly I'm the responsible adult you raised." Silence. "You didn't call when I left," I said. "You didn't care. Until the bill showed up." "That's not fair," Dad muttered. "No," I said. "What's not fair is being treated like a ghost for years while Ivy gets a confetti cannon every time she breathes." "She needed more help," Mom said. "She's not as strong as you." I tilted my head. "No, she's not as useful. That's why you keep crawling back." They looked at each other like they were hoping the other would come up with a better argument. "You're still our daughter," my mom said, her voice suddenly sugary. "Not when you need a seat at the table," I shot back. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. But my words landed sharp and heavy. My dad finally exhaled. "If you won't help, we'll figure something else out." "Guess you'll have to," I said, opening the door. "Good luck." My mom paused at the doorway. "Don't expect us to be there when you need something." I laughed, dry and bitter. "You never were." Then I shut the door behind them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there for a moment, breathing in the silence. It was thick and full of everything I'd swallowed over the years. And for once, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. But something in me knew they weren't done yet. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications stacked like bricks, one after another: texts, missed calls, even emails. For a moment, I thought something terrible had happened. I thought maybe something had gone wrong with someone in the family. But then I saw the names. Mom, Dad. A few cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. My stomach dropped. I already knew this wasn't going to be an apology. It was never an apology. The first message from my mom said, "You really embarrassed us. Do you even care how you made us look?" My dad added his own, "You don't treat your parents like this. We raised you better than that." Ivy's message? "Wow, you couldn't even chip in a few hundred? That's just sad." Then came another from Mom, "Your aunt and uncle are disgusted by how you acted, so are we." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Not one word about what they did. No mention of the empty chair. No ownership. Just guilt-tripping and accusations because I didn't pay for something I wasn't even invited to properly. I felt my jaw clench as I scrolled through the messages, each one more passive-aggressive than the last. They weren't reaching out. Because they felt bad, they were upset that their plan didn't work. I was supposed to show up, quietly clap for Ivy's latest tiny milestone, and then foot the bill like some walking credit card. Instead, I walked out. And now they were trying to flip the script. I silenced my phone and went to make coffee. Holding the warm mug helped a little, but the frustration stayed with me, curling under my skin. The worst part wasn't just the dinner. It was everything behind it. The years of being sidelined, the quiet ways they made me feel invisible. I thought about all the times I worked late to pay my way through college, all the scholarships I applied for alone, all the meals I skipped so I could afford rent. Meanwhile, Ivy breezed through school with full financial support, vacations, new clothes, and emotional hand-holding. They said she needed more help. I think what they meant was she needed more of everything, and I was the easy one to forget. Just as I sat down to clear my head, my phone rang. It was my mom. A tiny part of me thought, maybe this time she's calling to make it right. I answered. "What is it?" I asked, flat and tired. She didn't even pause. "You need to fix this. We've been humiliated." I blinked. "Fix what exactly?" She huffed like I was being difficult. "You walked out like a spoiled brat, then refused to help us when we needed you. That restaurant bill was hard for us to cover." I leaned back, barely able to believe the words coming out of her mouth. "That's your problem," I said calmly. "You planned a party and didn't plan for the cost. That's on you. You could have helped." She snapped. "You have savings, a good job. You let us suffer when you didn't have to." I laughed once, bitterly. "You mean you finally had to deal with consequences? And now you're mad I didn't bail you out?" She got quiet, then said, "You've changed. This isn't how we raised you." That made something in me snap. "No, this is exactly how you raised me. To be quiet, to swallow everything, to put Ivy first and pretend it was normal, to show up and be grateful for scraps. And guess what? I'm done with that version of myself." There was a pause. Then she said, almost like a threat, "You're gonna regret this. Don't cut us off. We're your family." I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "You already cut me off a long time ago. I'm just done pretending it didn't happen." Then I ended the call. And for a few seconds my hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had never spoken to her like that before. It felt terrifying and freeing all at once. But I knew deep down this wasn't the end. Not with people like them. When they couldn't control you emotionally, they'd find another way. Sure enough, the next morning I woke up to chaos. My lock screen was flooded again, only this time it wasn't just messages. It was tags, comments, DMs. I opened my phone and saw it immediately. My mother had made a public post on Facebook, and not just any post. It was a carefully crafted essay dressed in concern and sorrow, full of soft words hiding sharp daggers. It started with, "It breaks my heart to write this, but as parents, sometimes we have to accept that no matter how much love we give, some children still choose to turn their backs on the people who raised them." I could feel my pulse rising as I kept reading. Last night we celebrated a big achievement for our daughter Ivy. It was supposed to be a joyful gathering, but not everyone wanted to be part of our happiness. Our other daughter, let's call her X, arrived unexpectedly, disrupted the evening, and stormed out when she realized it wasn't about her. Then she refused to help when we had an unexpected financial issue, even though she's in a position to do so. I stared at the words, stunned. She twisted the entire event, turned it into a sob story where I was the selfish one, the problem child, the ungrateful daughter. The lies were bad enough. But what made my skin crawl were the comments. People the first didn't even know well were replying with hearts and sad emojis. "So sorry you're going through this," one said. "Some kids just don't appreciate anything." Another added, "You've always been such a caring mom," one more chimed in. Then, right in the thread, Ivy added her own voice. "She's always been distant. We tried everything. It just hurts watching our parents get treated like this." I could barely breathe reading that. It was like watching strangers talk about a version of me that didn't exist. The inbox came next. DMs from old friends, distant relatives, people from high school I hadn't spoken to in years. "I hope you're okay, but what your mom posted was really upsetting." Saw the post. Just wanted to say, don't let pride ruin family. Honestly, it sounded like you overreacted. One even wrote, "Wow, I never pegged you as someone so cold." I felt this wave of something between rage and heartbreak crash over me. They weren't just lying. They were turning people against me. They were shaping the narrative, making sure everyone saw me as the villain while they wore the halo. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment and tell everyone exactly what happened. About the chair that didn't exist. About Ivy's smug voice. About the years of being overlooked. But I didn't. Because I already knew how that would go. If I argued, I'd be called dramatic. If I shared screenshots, I'd be making it worse. If I spoke up, they'd twist that too. So I sat there, holding my phone, thinking, they wanted a public story? Fine. But they forgot something important. I don't explode. I don't shout. I build. So I decided, if they wanted to spin lies about me, then maybe it was finally time I told the truth. Not for them, not even to change minds, but to set the record straight for me. I opened my notes app and began writing. I sat with my phone in hand, rereading the comments under my mom's public post, each one tightening something in my chest. The way people just accepted her words without question, without knowing anything about what really happened, made me feel like I was suffocating. They saw a grieving mother, not the woman who watched me walk out of a dinner without saying a word because there wasn't even a place for me at the table. She had built this story so carefully, choosing just the right tone to sound like the victim. Ivy backed her up without hesitation, feeding into the performance like she'd rehearsed for it. And people ate it up. They always do when the lie is dressed in guilt and sugar. But I wasn't going to let it go this time. I opened my notes app and started typing. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say at first. But once the words started, they didn't stop. I told the truth, not just about what happened at the restaurant, but everything that led up to it. I explained how I had been invited under the impression it was a simple dinner, not a full-blown celebration for Ivy. I wrote about walking in and seeing that long table full of family. Decorations everywhere, a banner with her name stretched across the wall, and not a single seat left for me. I mentioned how Ivy loudly told the room she didn't expect me to show up, how my mother avoided my eyes when I asked if they had saved me a place, and how I walked out quietly, saying nothing because I was done begging for space in a family that never seemed to have room for me. Then I went deeper. I didn't rant. I didn't lash out. I wrote with the kind of calm that only comes when you've been carrying silence for too long, and it finally breaks. I explained how growing up, every small thing Ivy did was treated like a grand achievement. A good grade meant a dinner out. A part-time job at a smoothie place turned into balloons and cake. Meanwhile, I had to work twice as hard just to get noticed. And even then, it was usually just a passing comment before the conversation shifted back to her. When I got into college, I paid for it myself. Loans, side jobs, late nights. And what did I get? "That's good, sweetie." And then another hour of talk about Ivy's weekend trip. When I graduated, found a job in my field, and actually started building a life, they didn't say a word. But Ivy gets a tiny promotion after 2 months at a coffee shop, and suddenly we're throwing parties and ordering champagne. I didn't write it to get attention. I didn't want pity. I just wanted the record to be clear. I ended the post by saying I wasn't looking to argue or fight. I simply refused to let people paint me as selfish, when all I ever did was try to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Then I hit publish and locked my phone. For a while, I didn't check anything. I cleaned the kitchen, took a shower, let the silence settle around me. I didn't feel better yet, but I felt lighter. Like the truth had been pressing down on me for years and I'd finally let it go. A few hours later, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up my phone and opened the app. The post had already been shared over 100 times. The comments section had exploded, but not in the way I expected. People were supporting me. Not all of them, of course. There were still a few who clung to my mom's version of events, saying I should have handled it privately or that family matters shouldn't be aired online. But most of the replies were people saying they understood, that they'd been the overlooked sibling, the quiet one, the responsible child who got taken for granted, while the golden child got confetti for existing. Some people told their own stories, and it was like reading pieces of my own life from different voices. One woman said, "This hit me so hard. My brother failed 3 semesters in college and still got more support than I did after graduating with honors. Another said, "You didn't overreact. You finally stood up for yourself. That's strength, not selfishness." And then the private messages started rolling in, some from family members I hadn't spoken to in a long time. A cousin wrote, "Honestly, I always noticed how they treated you differently. I just didn't know what to say back then, I'm sorry." A second cousin messaged, "Your post made me rethink a lot about how I've seen things growing up. You deserved better." People the first hadn't expected to hear from were finally seeing what I had carried alone for so long. Of course, it didn't take long before my mother found out. She didn't comment publicly, no, that would be too direct. Instead, she sent me a message that started with, "Wow, I didn't think you'd stoop to this." Then came the guilt trip in full force. "You aired our private matters online and now people are judging us. Your father is heartbroken. Ivy is devastated. Is that what you wanted?" No apology. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just more blame. As if the real offense was not the years of exclusion but the fact that I dared to speak about it. I didn't reply. A few hours later, Ivy posted something vague and passive-aggressive. A black screen with white text. "Some people will twist any story to make themselves the victim. Stay strong, and remember who truly loves you." Her followers responded with sympathy, of course. But the tide was shifting. A few people commented asking what really happened. Someone even linked my post underneath. I didn't say a word, I didn't need to. The thing is, I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. I wasn't even angry anymore, not in the way I used to be. What I felt now was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't stuck waiting for someone to see me. I had seen myself. I had told my own story. And no matter how they tried to spin it, the truth was out there. My parents stopped messaging after that. Maybe they didn't know what else to say. Or maybe they were regrouping, planning some other way to guilt me into silence. But I wasn't worried. I had finally drawn a line. A clear one. And even if they never respected it, I would. A few days passed. Then something unexpected happened. One of my mother's friends, someone I barely knew, sent me a private message. She said she had read both sides, and while she wasn't picking one, she just wanted to say, "It takes a lot of courage to walk away from people who hurt you and still try to call it love." That line stuck with me. Because that was it, wasn't it? They called it love, but it always came with conditions, with strings, with a side of dismissal. And when I stopped playing along, suddenly I was the villain. But if standing up for myself made me the villain in their story, then so be it. I'd rather be hated for being honest than loved for being silent. The week after I shared my side of the story, things got quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but tense. Storm brewing somewhere quiet. The kind where, people are talking, just not to your face. It was like everyone around me suddenly remembered I existed, but for the wrong reasons. Some messaged out of curiosity, others out of guilt, but the most surprising ones were silent. The people who used to comment on every photo Ivy posted. The ones who used to share my mom's yearly look at our perfect family holiday pictures. They stopped liking, stopped reacting, some even unfollowed. I didn't expect them to take sides, but that silence said more than words ever could. Then the fallout really began. It started with Ivy. She made a second post, longer this time, trying to reframe everything as a misunderstanding. She talked about how family is complicated, how we should have spoken in private, how my reaction came from years of miscommunication. She even added a few blurry childhood photos of us together, captioning one with "I miss simpler times." I almost laughed. Simpler times? She meant when I kept my mouth shut, when I let her shine without ever asking for my own light. Her post was vague enough to be manipulative, but soft enough that her followers kept comforting her, saying things like, "You'll get through this, and don't let bitterness win." But beneath the surface, I could feel the shift. Some people weren't buying it anymore. A few days later, my aunt, my mom's older sister, called me. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, so I was skeptical when I saw her name. I answered with a cautious "Hi," expecting another guilt trip, but her voice was soft, almost uncertain. She said she had read both posts and wanted to hear from me directly. Not to argue, not to scold, just to understand. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust her. Then she said, "I always had a feeling something wasn't right. I just didn't know how deep it ran." That sentence opened a floodgate. I told her everything, not just about the dinner, but about the years of being overlooked, the double standards, the unspoken rules in our house, about who got grace and who got grit. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to defend anyone. When I finished, all she said was, "I believe you." And then, "I'm sorry I didn't see it before." It caught me off guard. Not because I wanted her apology, but because it felt like the first time someone from that side of the family had looked at me and actually seen me. Not as the one who caused problems, but as the one who had been carrying them. Then came the bigger shock, apparently. My mom's post didn't just annoy strangers. It stirred things up with people she hadn't expected to alienate. One of her old friends, someone who was at Ivy's party, messaged me anonymously and said she felt uncomfortable watching the way I was treated that night. She said it was obvious I wasn't expected, and that she'd never forget how my mother flinched when I asked where my seat was. She said she kept waiting for someone to step in. No one did. That message hit differently. It wasn't about being right or vindicated, it was confirmation. Proof that I wasn't crazy or overly sensitive or reading too much into things. Someone else saw it, and it was real. But with that came another realization. If one person saw it, others did too. And if they stayed quiet, it meant they chose comfort over truth, just like I used to. Meanwhile, back in my parents' house, the tension was apparently boiling over. I didn't hear it from them, of course, but people talk, especially when they think you've burned all your bridges. One of my cousins messaged me saying my dad had snapped at a family lunch, yelling at someone for bringing up my name. My mom, apparently, was furious that her post didn't land the way it should have. Ivy had started acting distant, posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and trust on her stories. From the outside, it looked like the perfect family was cracking, and not because of me, but because of the truth they'd spent years ignoring. And the more I stayed silent, the more their guilt had room to echo. That's what happens when the person you've pushed away stops chasing you. Suddenly the echo feels like an accusation. Suddenly your version of events doesn't hold up without someone else to carry the blame. Then came a moment I didn't expect. My dad texted me. Just one line. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. This was the man who, during my entire childhood, barely said more than a few words to me unless it was about chores or school. The man who let my mom run the show, who watched Ivy get showered with praise and never once stepped in to balance the scales. I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit there like it was on trial. A day later, he sent another. "It's not easy seeing your daughter write something like that, but I understand now." That sentence sat with me all day. I didn't know if I believed it. I didn't know if he meant it, but it was the closest thing to accountability I'd seen from either of them. And strangely, it didn't feel satisfying. It just felt late. Like he'd only realized what he lost when the silence got too loud to ignore. I didn't call him, but I did send a reply. "I spent years waiting for you to notice what was happening. You didn't. Now that I've spoken up, I'm not going back to silence. If you want to talk, it has to be honest. No guilt, no rewrites, just truth." He didn't answer right away, and honestly, I didn't need him to, because I wasn't writing to rebuild a bridge. I was drawing a boundary. And as the days passed, more people began to show their true colors. Some family members unfollowed me. A few sent vague messages telling me they hoped we could all heal and move on, like I hadn't just cracked open decades of neglect. But others came out of the woodwork to say they saw things differently now. A distant cousin reached out to say she always wondered why I seemed so distant at family events. But now she got it. She said she used to think I was just cold. Now she realized I was frozen out. That line stayed with me. Not cold, frozen out. There's a difference. One is a choice. The other is what happens when you've been standing in the same place too long, waiting for warmth that never comes. So I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping for someone to swoop in and fix things. I accepted the ugly truth that not every family story ends with hugs and healing. Sometimes the win isn't reconciliation. Sometimes it's just peace. Not the kind they preach about in Instagram quotes. The kind you earn when you stop pretending everything's okay. And slowly, that's what I started building. A life without the need to prove myself. A life where I wasn't trying to compete with Ivy or please my mom or earn crumbs of praise. A quiet, steady, self-made peace. I didn't feel the need to respond to every lie. I didn't need to post a rebuttal to every comment because I had finally spoken, and that was enough. Something changed in me after the dust settled. Not all at once, not in some grand emotional breakthrough, but slowly, quietly, like fog lifting after a long night. I wasn't angry anymore, not like before. I wasn't sitting with clenched fists or scrolling through messages with shaking hands. The storm inside me had calmed, and all that was left was space. And for the first time, I realized that space didn't need to be filled with their voices. It didn't need to be filled with apologies I'd never get or recognition I used to dream about. It could just exist as mine. I spent so many years trying to become someone they would be proud of. I picked a stable career path, never asked for help, never gave them a reason to say I failed. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble, showed up when invited, and swallowed my resentment every time I was treated like the background character in someone else's story. And still, I was overlooked. I thought if I just kept being useful, eventually they'd see me. But being useful isn't the same as being loved. It's not even close. So I stopped trying, not out of bitterness, but because it finally made sense that I was never going to win at a game I was never allowed to play. They had already picked their champion. Ivy could stumble and they'd call it strength. I could succeed and they'd call it expected. She was the favorite, the delicate one, the one who needed more. And I was the one who would always land on my feet no matter how far they dropped me. That was the role they wrote for me. But I wasn't interested in playing it anymore. I started spending more time with people who didn't see me through the lens of competition. A couple of close friends invited me to a weekend trip, and I said yes without guilt, even though my mom tried to call the day before and leave a voicemail reminding me it was Ivy's birthday that weekend. I didn't reply. I didn't send a gift. I didn't feel bad. That surprised me more than anything. I used to feel this tightness in my chest anytime I pulled away, like I owed them constant presence to prove I was still part of the family. But the truth was, family is more than blood. It's consistency, it's care. And I hadn't felt either from them in a long time. That trip with my friends ended up being more healing than I expected. There was no drama, no passive-aggressive comments, no one talking over me or comparing me to anyone else. We stayed up late playing card games, laughed until our faces hurt, made pancakes in the morning and ate them barefoot in the kitchen. No big plans, no forced celebrations, just comfort. Just being wanted for who I am instead of what I bring. It made me realize how unnatural it had been to always feel tense around my own family, like I was walking on a floor built over broken glass. A few weeks later, I got a card in the mail from my mom. It was one of those blank greeting cards with an overly sentimental quote on the front, something about forgiveness and finding your way back to the people who love you. Inside, in her cursive handwriting, she wrote, "I hope one day you remember where your real home is. We miss you. You'll always be our daughter." That would have gutted me once. A sentence like that used to tear open every part of me that still longed for belonging. But now, reading it felt hollow. Not cruel, not even manipulative, just empty. Because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Missing someone isn't the same as valuing them. You can miss the way they made you feel needed without ever respecting who they really are. You can miss someone's silence when their voice started making you uncomfortable. I placed the card back in its envelope and tucked it away in a drawer, not because I wanted to save it, but because throwing it out felt like more effort than it was worth. I didn't respond. I didn't send anything back. And still, the world kept spinning. I kept working, kept reading, kept living. Nothing collapsed because I didn't chase reconciliation. Around that time, Ivy made another post. A photo of her with our parents, all of them smiling in front of a dinner table. The caption said, "Grateful for the people who show up no matter what." A few people liked it, a few commented hearts, but something about the image felt staged, like they were trying too hard to perform happiness. I didn't feel jealous, I didn't feel wounded, I just felt done. I think that's what real peace is, not the absence of pain, but the absence of needing to explain it. I didn't need to argue anymore. I didn't need to convince anyone of how much it had hurt. I didn't need to prove that I had been loyal or loving or patient. I had been all those things, and it still wasn't enough for them. Not because I failed, but because they were never really looking. So I stopped looking back. I stopped checking their pages, stopped wondering if maybe they'd change, if maybe next time would be different. I stopped waiting for an invitation that came with a seat. Instead, I started building my own table, one where I got to decide who sat with me, one where kindness wasn't conditional, one where I didn't have to earn the right to belong. It was strange at first, this quiet life. No big confrontations, no dramatic ending, just distance where there used to be noise. But it felt good. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I rearranged my apartment, started watering my plants regularly, bought a new bookshelf, and filled it with stories about women who had to walk away from everything to find themselves. It wasn't some massive transformation. I didn't move to a new city or cut off all contact. I just stopped giving the people who hurt me the power to decide how I saw myself. And in that stillness, I began to see the girl I used to be. The one who stayed quiet because she thought love was earned through sacrifice. The one who believed she had to shrink herself to make room for everyone else. The one who stayed even when it hurt because she hoped one day someone would say, "We see you." I held space for her. I forgave her. But I wasn't her anymore. Now, when people ask about my family, I don't launch into explanations or defend my choices. I just say, "We're not close," and let it hang there. Some ask follow-up questions. Others nod with quiet understanding. But none of them need the full story to get it. Because most of the time, The people who understand don't need all the details. And the ones who demand justification were never going to see you clearly anyway. The best part? I stopped waiting for milestones to feel proud. I didn't need a party, a cake, or a banner to celebrate who I was becoming. I started taking myself out to dinner when I hit personal goals. I bought a nice bottle of wine the day I finished a tough project. I lit candles and danced in my living room just because it was Friday and I felt alive. And slowly, I learned how to praise myself without needing anyone else's permission. One afternoon, a few months after everything settled into silence, I found myself walking through an old neighborhood I used to pass during college. It was strange how little had changed. The same corner cafe with the chipped windows, the same bookstore with crooked shelves, even the same smell of burnt espresso drifting down the street. I hadn't meant to go there. I was just walking, needing space for my thoughts, and somehow ended up standing in front of a bench I used to sit on during breaks when I had nowhere else to be. Back then, I used to come here between classes, eating cheap snacks and staring at the passing cars, wondering if all this effort would be worth it. I thought if I just kept going, someday I'd finally be enough. Enough for them to notice. Enough to be loved without conditions. And now, standing there again as a completely different version of myself, I realized that moment had already passed, not because they had changed, but because I had. Closure wasn't what I expected it to be. It didn't come with apologies or dramatic reunions or a sudden flood of validation from the people who once ignored me. It came in the form of small moments, like realizing I hadn't thought about Ivy in weeks or feeling genuinely happy when a coworker praised my work and not wishing it had been my mom. It came when I stopped holding on to every slight and instead started living like I had nothing to prove. Letting go wasn't a decision I made all at once. It was something that happened slowly, through repetition, through silence, through choosing myself over and over again, until the weight of their absence didn't feel like loss anymore. It just felt like peace. There were still little moments that tried to tug me back. Like when a family friend reached out around the holidays, saying they were putting together a surprise dinner for my mom's birthday, and that it would be nice if I stopped by. They said it casually, like everything was normal, like there hadn't been months of distance and posts and messages and things you don't take back once they've been said. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel hurt. I just felt done. I politely declined and didn't explain. I didn't need to. People often act like you have to justify your boundaries. Like every no should come with a tragic backstory, and every decision to walk away should be followed by a list of offenses and emotional receipts. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone access to the parts of yourself that had to heal in the dark. You don't have to reopen wounds just to prove they were real. Some doors stay closed because reopening them only invites back the draft that made you sick in the first place. I spent the holidays with friends that year. We made a simple meal, lit some candles, played music, and exchanged small, thoughtful gifts. No forced smiles, no tension hovering in the air, no pretending to be okay for the sake of family dynamics. Just warmth, just belonging, just laughter that didn't require performance. That night, I looked around the room and realized I hadn't lost a family. I had outgrown one. And in its place, I had started building something better, something chosen, something real. My therapist once told me that grief isn't just about losing people. Sometimes, grief is mourning the version of your life you always thought you'd have. And maybe that's what took the longest to let go of. Not my mother's approval or my sister's attention, or the idea that one day things would magically become fair. What I really had to release was the dream I clung to, the idea that if I just loved them hard enough, stayed quiet enough, achieved enough, they'd finally meet me halfway. But halfway never came. It was always me doing the reaching. So I stopped, and when I did, I realized I hadn't failed. I had just finally let reality settle where hope used to sit. Some people still try to reconnect. They send little updates, photos, invitations. Ivy sent me a message a few weeks ago saying she missed having a sister and hoped we could talk soon. I read it twice, trying to figure out if it was sincere or just another attempt to smooth things over without ever really addressing anything. But it didn't matter. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because I had finally accepted something simple and honest. Some relationships stay broken, not out of spite, but because healing isn't always safe when the environment remains the same. And I was done putting myself back into spaces where love had to be earned like a prize. There's a photo I keep on my desk now, not one of childhood or family holidays. Just a picture a friend took on that cabin trip a while back. I'm sitting on a porch swing, wrapped in a sweater, coffee in hand, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sun. I didn't even know they took it until they sent it to me later. You looked peaceful, the message said. And they were right. That's what healing looks like. Not perfection, not public validation, but quiet, unbothered peace. I think about that often, how easy it is to stay locked in the same cycles, convincing yourself that one more sacrifice will finally unlock the love you deserve. But sometimes the key isn't in trying harder. Sometimes it's in walking away and realizing the door was never meant for you to stay behind. Sometimes it's in accepting that the version of you who begged for crumbs doesn't need to exist anymore. I'm not angry at my parents now. I don't wish them harm. I hope they find joy in the life they built, even if I'm not part of it. I hope Ivy finds the approval she always seemed to chase. I hope my mother finds a way to be proud without needing an audience. But I no longer see their comfort as my responsibility. Their narrative is not mine to hold up. And if they want to live in a version of the past where I was the difficult one, they're welcome to it. But I won't be stepping back into that role just to make them feel better. So no, I didn't go too far. I went exactly as far as I needed to go to finally feel free. I stopped showing up to be tolerated. I stopped keeping quiet to keep the peace. I stopped paying for dinners I wasn't welcome at, literally and metaphorically. And in doing so, I gave myself the thing they never could, a life where I am no longer waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. And that's something no amount of guilt, silence, or staged smiles can ever take away. So if you're reading this and you're the one who's always trying, always giving, always hoping they'll finally see you, let me be the voice you haven't heard yet. It's okay to stop. It's okay to let go. It's okay to walk away, even if you still love them. Because love isn't always enough to stay somewhere that breaks you in small, invisible ways. And you don't have to be the bigger person just to keep being hurt. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave the table that was never set for you in the first place and build your own. Story 2, she's a lawyer and you're useless. At supper, my dad told me. Then, just before Amanda lost everything and they came pleading with me for money, I said, go ask your star daughter for help. It had all begun 5 years prior. With an offer letter in one hand and her graduation in the other, Amanda walked into our parents' house on the day she became a lawyer. She was treated like royalty, and I was treated as like I didn't exist after that. Fairness was never a concern of my parents. They didn't only prefer her, though, following that day. They ridiculed me. You're useless, and she's a lawyer. At a family supper, my dad commented. My mother wiped her eyes after laughing so hard. Amanda made no effort to show concern. As if she were too nice for us, she simply smiled and took a drink of her wine. It became their favorite habit after that. Every birthday, every holiday, and every dull Sunday meal. Every time I mentioned my job, they made sure I was embarrassed. My parents gave me an eye roll. My mother would say if I stated anything I was attempting to do, you might figure something out one day. My father would shake his head and groan. With time, Amanda became more vicious. William, the nobody, put that on your business card. She once called me in front of several family members. And even after she got a new automobile, it continued. When she acquired a condo and I sold my cheap little wreck, my folks kept bringing it up. When would I quit acting like a college student, they asked. They told me that if I had put in more effort, I may be able to travel when she did. I retaliated. I said nothing. I didn't go to visits. Nothing changed as a result of it. I was once again their joke as soon as I came through their door. I had no one to defend me but my grandparents. When my dad was instructed to stop by my grandfather, he simply laughed and responded, "We're just playing around." "No matter what," my grandmother replied. She was proud of me. However, nothing was fixed by it. They hoped I didn't exist, and Amanda continued to be the favorite. Then came yesterday. My phone rang late at night, close to midnight. Amanda was the one. Something urged me to pick it up, but I nearly ignored it. She was crying, intoxicated. I'm afraid. She required assistance. She abruptly contacted 6 months ago and claimed she needed money now, only till my bonus arrives. I didn't ask questions, she said. I instructed her to repay the $7,200 as soon as she could. She never gave it back. She was phoning once again now, but this time, the reason wasn't just money. There is nowhere for me to go, she sobbed. William, please. I ought to have declined. I ought to have instructed her to handle it herself. Instead, though, I questioned her about it. She eventually started weeping and hiccuping at that point. First, she confessed. Months prior, she had lost her job. Our folks were always boasting about the major task, lost. She refused to explain my question. It doesn't matter, she insisted again. It was unfair. They want my departure. Too stunned to react, I just sat there. That sister of mine who never fails to provide compliments. The one who pretended to be superior for years. The one our parents were always flaunting like she was. Their greatest achievement was now unemployed. I was unable to comprehend it. On what have you been subsisting? At last, I inquired. She remained silent for a while. Then she gave away the next surprise. Her money were all gone, maxed out all credit cards, and took out many loans. When it proved insufficient, she sought assistance from her parents. I was most surprised by that portion. I tried to take in what she had just acknowledged while holding my frozen phone tightly. You asked them? Yes, she muttered. She had informed our parents that she was having problems. For months, not just once. And how did they react? They assisted her. They made sure she didn't struggle, paid her rent, and took care of her bills. When I needed assistance, they were the same individuals that made fun of me. The people who thought I was useless rolled their eyes at everything I did and scoffed at my work. When I pleaded for help, they urged me to stop whining, yet they covertly handed Amanda all they had as if she were too weak to fail. It wasn't the worst, though. She paused, then revealed more. They needed her, not just supported her. For years, Amanda had kept them afloat. They weren't paying for their home, their travels, their new couch, or their elegant meals. Amanda was the one. They acted like hardworking, normal guys, but their cozy way of life. She did it. She was now left with nothing. She said, I had to get out of my flat, no longer able to afford it. I sold my vehicle. I have no money at all. I sat stunned. The same individuals who advised me to manage life and be a man had secretly relied on my sister. All along, the same people who ridiculed me for not earning six figures had been living off of her money. I wanted to shout. Despite my want to destroy my phone, I just said, What do you want? She didn't say anything. Then the response appeared, low and gentle. I need assistance. I remained silent after saying those remarks. The world seemed to have turned upside down. The sister who always treated me like a second-class citizen is now pleading with me. Now, the person who had never needed anybody was alone, afraid, and destitute. I could have felt guilty. Perhaps I would have in the past. Instead, though, I laughed. For once, I wasn't at the bottom, and I knew precisely what I was going to do next. So I laughed until my eyes started to well up. Before allowing Amanda to move in, I took a moment. My want to say no was strong. Wanted to tell her to figure things out the way I had to, but another thing. Curiosity, perhaps. Perhaps something more sinister. Wanted to see what transpired when I was her only choice. The following day, she arrived early. A duffel bag and 2 large luggage in the hands of a typically polished person. She looked rough. Messy hair, crumpled clothing, sleepy eyes. As if she hadn't slept for a long time. Deborah, a friend of mine, was not happy. She recalled all the times Amanda had teased me. Every terrible prank, especially the ones that involved her. They were never friendly. They were now living together. Amanda seldom left the guest room at first. She said, avoiding eye contact with us, pretended that there was no stress. She was clearly embarrassed, but even more clearly, she had nowhere else to go. My parents soon learned. Mom was the first to call. Her tone was pleasant and syrupy, as if it were a casual check-in. She didn't thank me, didn't offer an apology. A phony comment regarding my generosity. Later, Dad called. He made no effort to feign. He made an effort to persuade me to send Amanda to live with them. I finally understood what all of this meant for a long time at that point. Amanda had served as a source of pride, a model of success, and evidence that they had brought up a successful child. She was now living at my house, completely dependent on me, and in need of my help. They were unable to cope with the change in power. Their beloved daughter was failing while I had established a stable existence, and they had been calling me a letdown for so long. They were no longer merely uneasy. They were in a panic. A few days after Amanda was in the kitchen, silently talking on the phone with my mom, the true stunner happened. Though not low enough to be missed, her voice was gentle. Even though I wasn't attempting to listen, I could plainly hear my mother's voice over the speaker. She was instructing Amanda to ask me for money. I initially believed I had misunderstood, but my mother persisted, telling Amanda to ask how much money I had and whether I could also give them some cash. I felt as if I had been struck by a shovel. When I was broke, they used to make fun of me, made fun of me for lacking Amanda's level of accomplishment. They weren't only heard over Amanda's demise now that she had nothing left. Somehow, the bank they consistently rejected turned out to be their best option, as they looked for a new one. I was unsure about Amanda's response. She appeared confined. She was torn between preserving what little respect she still had and aiding them. However, I became fully aware of something at that precise moment. I had been the joke for the most of my life. I wasn't going to allow them to abuse me the same way they did her, since I was the one they needed now. I didn't blow up. I didn't shout. I just walked out of the kitchen, leaving Amanda in my wake. I was still holding the phone while my mother's voice could be heard clearly. Shortly after entering the living room, she appeared uncomfortable, as if she knew I was listening to everything she said. Like I didn't scream, even though she believed I would. "Pack up and get out if you ever try to get money from me for them," I told her, looking her in the eye. She didn't dispute. She turned aside with a little nod. However, everything changed after that. The atmosphere of the flat drastically shifted. Previously acting as though I was beneath her, Amanda suddenly seems uncertain of herself. She had lost her courage. The snarky comments she used to make at every holiday lunch had changed. She was mute, uneasy, and for the first time, uncomfortable in her own flesh. Deborah made things more difficult. She didn't say anything hurtful, but she also didn't make an effort to be nice. If anything, she stayed in our room, avoided Amanda entirely, or found reasons to leave while Amanda was around. She was not to fault. She had every cause to be unhappy with the outcome. A few days later, the real drama began. I received a call from my grandparents inviting me to join them for supper. Despite their lack of explanation, I could sense that something odd was happening. Everything made sense when I got there. Amanda was unhappy as she sat at their table. My parents were also present, their features tensed with annoyance. This was no ordinary meal. It was a prelude. My dad started talking about family responsibilities as soon as I sat down, on the necessity for us to support one another. My mother went on to say that since Amanda had contributed so much throughout the years, it was now my duty to return the favor. Leaning back, I remained silent and let them to continue. They were no longer even acting. They were blatantly requesting money. I could see right through their attempt to make it seem like this was about love and unity. Since she was broke, Amanda had been their ATM for years. They were rushing, and in some way, I had turned into their next source of income. I let them talk for a while, pretending to be concerned. However, as they paused and awaited a response, I only grinned and said that I had no interest in. There was complete quiet. My father's face grew hot with rage. My mom made an effort to hide it, pretending that they were only seeking emotional support and that this had nothing to do with money. However, the desperation in her eyes was evident. Then an unexpected event occurred. After being silent for the whole conversation, my grandma abruptly chimed in. She looked over at both of my parents and asked them just how much money Amanda had given them over the years. She was curious about how much they had stolen from her. Nobody responded, so she continued. She brought up the fact that they had been secretly depleting Amanda's money account while flaunting her as their biggest achievement for years. She reminded them how they had shamed me time and again for not being as affluent or successful, while they discreetly depended on their daughter's wages to keep things running. And they abruptly returned to me now that Amanda was unable to bear that burden. She stopped asking after that. She was enraged. Then my grandfather also took over. He chastised them both for taking advantage of their own children and shook his head at them. For the first time in my life, I just sat there and watched everything come apart. It wasn't me who was held responsible. Indeed, they were. My parents attempted to change the facts and provide an explanation, but it was too late. Amanda and my grandparents had finally come to terms with who they truly were. She didn't protect them. She didn't say a thing. For the first time, she simply sat at the table and looked down at her hands. She was well aware of what had happened to her, and after my grandparents addressed them, I noticed a change in the regret in her eyes. The silence at the end of dinner was terrible. Your plate was barely touched by my mom. My father continued tapping the wood with his fingertips. Amanda seems to want to disappear. She had never faced such a difficulty, particularly not in front of relatives. Amanda was already home when I got back, like she had done all week. I thought she would be hiding in the guest room. However, she was on the couch instead. All eyes were fixed on the ground. I ignored her and went directly into the kitchen. Then she said something. "You were correct," she muttered. I stopped. She kept talking without raising her head. She claimed to have now realized what had been going on the entire time. She acknowledged that they had taken advantage of her, depleted her of all she owned, and then abandoned her like trash. She admitted that she had been demeaning me the entire time. They were blind, and so was she. I was at a loss for words. I had been waiting for her to awaken and realize everything for years. I wasn't sure how to feel, though, now that she had. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "They still think you will give them cash." After I left the dinner, my stomach churned. My parents had pulled Amanda aside and told her to keep pressuring me. They believed that I would eventually give in and that I was just being stubborn. They instructed her to persuade me that I had a responsibility to assist the family. It dawned on me then that this was not the end. I wouldn't simply turn them away, and I was going to stop it. I unexpectedly drove to their house the following morning. My grandparents still reside there, and my grandmother gave me a dejected look, as if she already knew why I had come when she opened the door and saw me standing outside. I went straight into the living room. My dad had a newspaper in his lap. My mom was talking on the phone. Both of them looked up, taken aback by my unexpected visit. I didn't wait. I told them straight out that I was fully aware of the situation. I admitted that I knew Amanda had been paying for their whole way of life. I admitted that I was aware that they had abandoned her as soon as her funds were exhausted. They were now considering me to be their next revenue stream. I stopped them when they tried to lie. I informed them that it was all over. They weren't prepared for what I hit them with next. I was cutting all ties. I wasn't just refusing to give money, I was leaving their lives completely behind. I had had enough of being made fun of. Being remembered only when it was convenient was getting old to me. Being the son who didn't matter unless they needed something was getting old to me. My mother's face turned completely pale. My dad tightened his jaw so firmly I feared it could break. They were unable to communicate. Then, just as I started to go, my grandma stepped up and said something that switched everything. She claimed to be done as well. She told them that the way they had treated their own children, as though they were only helpful when giving money, made her feel ashamed. After discussing it with my grandfather, she then revealed the biggest surprise of all. Their will was being updated. All of it was intended for my parents. Lost. It turns out that they had something to pass down, but I had no idea. My parents would no longer receive any of it. My mother's eyes widened. My grandmother wasn't finished, but my father leaped to his feet in rage. From now on, if someone is going to get what we leave behind, it's going to be you, she added, turning to face me. They had nothing to offer me. Nothing, no money, no property. But that time, when my parents realized they had lost everything, they were terrified and panicked. That was the moment I'd never forget. That was the true finish. Suddenly, I left through the door. I imagined chopping them off would feel huge, like a spectacular finale to years of agony. However, it didn't. It felt serene, easy, similar to silently closing a door. You won't have to go through it ever again. I initially assumed they would respond. They weren't the kind to accept a situation in silence. And I was correct. My mother phoned me 8 times in a row the next morning. When I failed to answer, the signals began to appear. Lengthy texts that are full of emotional manipulation, phony concern, and guilt trips. I was selfish, she remarked. That family remains united, said she was shocked that I was doing this to them. She tried everything, including accusing my grandparents of turning me against them and using emotional blackmail and guilt. Then my father's message arrived, just like I had anticipated. Behave like an adult. When you're done being theatrical, give me a call. They were so predictable that it was almost comical. They have no interest in making any repairs. They simply detested being out of control. Thus, I blocked them both. Then, calm. For the first time in a very long time, there was silence. No more criticism, no more voices, no more pressure. With them no longer hovering above her, Amanda even appeared lighter. She started to appear normal. Something changed, but she remained distant. She was less entitled or gentler. She even expressed regret to Deborah, said she had acted cruelly without cause. It was more than I had anticipated from her, but it didn't completely repair the harm. A week later, she revealed something to me that I wasn't prepared for. She was on the move. Not just from where I live, but from the entire city. She had relocated to a different state for work. It's not a high-status position or anything spectacular. Simply something stable. Something to start over. She claimed to have finally realized that she would never be able to recover if she remained near our parents. They had stolen her money, broken her heart, and taken away the minute she was unable to give. They kicked her aside. She was tired of playing their pawn. At the beginning, I was dumbfounded for so long. She had been the object of their unending admiration, the one who got everything with minimal effort. All she had now was a backpack and a blank slate. She wasn't pleading with anybody else to save her either. She sat next to me on the couch the night before she moved out, looking at her fingers as if she wanted to speak. "You've always been the tougher one," she murmured, eventually turning to face me after a long moment of stillness. I didn't respond. Perhaps there was nothing else to say. She picked up her bags and departed the following day. No arguing or pleading, a kind farewell. After a few weeks, I received a ring from my grandparents. It turned out that my parents, in need of compassion, had turned back to them. All of a sudden, my mother began phoning, frequently feigning concern. My father pretended to be attempting to be the ideal child once more. Despite their terror, my grandparents refused to be fooled. My grandpa said that he immediately silenced my mother when she made suggestions about making amends, which obviously meant re-entering the will. All they're receiving is what they provided. I didn't hear anything more about them after he informed me. I didn't talk to my parents again. It may hurt, I thought. I thought I may miss them or question if I made the right choice. But in all honesty, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. For the first time in my life, I realized that I was more than enough, even though they had always made me feel unworthy. Their star child was everything they desired. Oddly enough, they made the incorrect decision. A brief update. A few months have passed since my trip. No contact. I wasn't going to write anything else, then something unexpected happened. In fact, Amanda is doing fairly well. Better than I thought. She occasionally texts me, but we are not really close. She was given a regular job. It's dependable, and she appears at ease, but it's neither flashy nor lucrative. She informed me that she had begun attending treatment. I was taken aback. She stated that she is attempting to reverse the years of pressure, guilt, and control that come with being the favored. She even acknowledged that she feels guilty about the way she handled me. She never said anything like that, which surprised me. However, here we are. And now for the unexpected part. My parents are disintegrating. As it happens, they weren't only depending on Amanda for assistance on sometimes. She had been helping them out more than I could have imagined, and they were drowning in debt. After doing some research, my grandparents discovered that my parents had taken out several loans, lived well over their means, and had refinanced their home. The only thing preventing them from collapsing was Amanda's money. Moreover, she is no longer there. At last, reality set in. Their extended family didn't work, so they first begged. They then attempted to guilt-trip my grandparents once again. That also didn't work. My mom tried something different as a result. She emailed me. It's long, dramatic, and full of phony anxiety. She wrote that she was about to lose everything, along with my dad. I had a responsibility to assist them as their son. She used all the typical emotional ploys, mentioning family ties, acting as though they did their best, and concluding that a true man looks out for his parents. I never answered. My dad sent his own note a week later. Even shorter. Absurd. You believe you've won, but when we're gone, you'll regret it. After reading it again, I burst out laughing. Because I did win. In actuality. Not in a vindictive manner, but in the sole manner that was significant. I was no longer in need of them. They persuaded me for years that I would never measure up. Now they're the ones collapsing. Additionally, I'm doing great. And most importantly, for the first time in my life, what people think doesn't matter to me. Story 3. My mother responded icily, "You're not coming for Christmas." I said, "Travis's parents don't want you. You choose money above me." Therefore, I texted and canceled all of my payments. Phone calls that start with silence usually irritate me. Usually, they had a negative meaning. Christmas is 3 days away. Before she even spoke, my mother's pause on the phone informed me what was about to happen. "Lauren, dear, I believe it's best if you don't come home for Christmas this year," she eventually stated. I almost dropped my coffee cup. "What are you saying, Mom?" I inquired. "It's simply, Travis's parents are coming to visit and they don't want you to be there," she said. They made that very clear. I took a seat on the couch and tried to make sense of what she had just said. My stepfather was Travis. When I was 10, he wed my mother. I've never been liked by his parents, but this time it seemed worse. They were being picked above me by my own mother. I tried not to sound angry as I said, "But we always spend Christmas together. Every year since the death of Dad. It's customary for us." "I know," she continued, "my dear. However, what?" I inquired. "In actuality, you're choosing strangers over your daughter." The stillness that followed was more devastating than any justification. Then, in a tense voice, she spoke at last. "Lauren. They threatened to remove Travis from their control if they learned. We still communicate with you. They threatened to cut us off and warned he would not receive any inheritance." "Is money the main factor here?" I spoke loudly. "No, that's not all," she said hastily. "We haven't spoken to you in years. I've already informed them. I need your cooperation on it. Only this once." I gave a chilly laugh. "Do you want me to act as though I don't exist at all? You came up with that idea." "Lauren, Travis's parents are difficult to cope with. They don't change their minds and are cruel. We must ensure that people believe you are no longer spoken to here. Please be understanding." I ended the call. I was at my breaking point in trying to comprehend why Travis's parents detested me. You would need to go back over 2 decades. When I was 4 years old, my real dad died in a car accident. It was just my mother and I dealing with life for 6 years. Then, 10 years after they were married, she met Travis, a widower with a daughter called Susan. He moved in with Susan and Travis. It was all well at first. I got along well with Susan. There were moments when we quarreled like sisters over pillows or the TV remote. Typical thing. However, Travis's parents detested me right away. They accused me of being impolite and misbehaving. She was raised without a father, as you can see. Right in front of me, they'd say. They gave Susan presents when they arrived, but I received nothing. They would converse as if I didn't exist, as if I were invisible. When I was 14, the worst event occurred. My mom and Travis left me and Susan with his parents to go on a trip. Usually we stayed with Emily, my mom's sister, but she was busy that moment. Travis's parents thought it was acceptable even though they didn't want us there, especially me. Susan and I got into a fight over the laptop after we were cooped up in the house for a week. Both of us were irritated and bored. I pushed her a little. Just a push, nothing hard. However, she shattered her arm after a severe fall. Then she screamed loudly. Her grandparents came running in. Her grandma phoned Travis in tears as her grandfather transported her to the hospital. She said, "You must go home now. Susan was severely injured by Lauren, who fractured her arm. She needs mental health support. She is unmanageable." Everything changed after that. They took away my phone, put me in a room, and only unlocked the door to let food in. They threatened to send me to juvie and labeled me insane. Mom and Travis returned from their vacation 3 days early. Travis was enraged. He claimed he couldn't put his faith in me. For 2 months, they sent me to live with Aunt Emily. Travis hardly gave me a glance when I returned. In an odd manner, Susan and I reconciled quickly. The accident drew us closer, but my parents still had me go to treatment for anger issues I didn't have. After that, the house felt like a prison. It seemed like I had finally gotten away when I turned 18 and relocated to a different city for college. I only kept in touch with Mom and Susan when I was at college. I was studying office and business-related disciplines and putting in a lot of effort to secure my future. My buddy Pamela and I were hired as interns at her father's chain of restaurants during my 3rd year. Everyone was taken aback when my business improvement strategy turned out to be successful. Within a few months, profits increased. Pamela's father offered me a job when we graduated from college. Pamela wanted me to be her top assistant, and he was giving her the restaurant business. I would be responsible for updating and growing the company. In a sense, I would be her closest companion. Pamela and I transformed the entire business. We developed a phone app, started food delivery, and set up spaces in the restaurants where patrons could use laptops while dining. Additionally, we created entertaining selfie spots in each location, introduced live kitchen video streams to demonstrate how clean everything was, and began culinary classes. Young people began to arrive in large numbers. We also maintained our usual clientele while attracting a large number of new ones. The company took off, and I was paid in a way that seemed unreal for the first time. I even began to save money. At that point, my mother called to inform me that Travis had lost his job. He lost his job. We're struggling to make our mortgage payments. Then Travis picked up the phone and apologized to Lauren for the past. I agreed since you're the only one who can assist right now. I sent money for their mortgage each month. Later, Travis landed a part-time job. However, I continued to send money. They had become accustomed to my assistance, so it wasn't hard for me. I was mistaken to believe that providing money would make us closer. I spent a lot of time sitting on my couch staring at my phone after that awful chat with my mother. My mind was all over the place. I had to talk to someone who would listen. I gave Susan a call. "Hello, sister, what's happening?" Her tone was cheerful as she asked, sounding nothing like I felt. "Mom called just now," I said, my voice trembling. "Because your grandparents would be home for Christmas. She advised me not to come home. They said that if they find out, they will cut Travis out of their will." He continues to speak with me. "For years, Mom has been deceiving them by claiming that she hasn't communicated with me at all. What the hell is wrong with them?" remarked Susan, who rarely used profanity. "She wants me to pretend I don't exist." "Silently," I said. "In order for them to keep the money, she wanted me to pretend that I wasn't related." Susan said without hesitation, "Screw that. I won't go either if they don't want you. They can spend Christmas without us both if they choose money above you." I started crying. Susan was the one person who remained by my side despite all that had transpired. I felt a little more at ease once I hung up with her. I gave a call to several pals I knew had nothing planned for Christmas. By that night, I had organized a last-minute Christmas party with Susan and 5 of my friends in my place the day before Christmas. Susan arrived with a bag of decorations and a little luggage. She poured tinsel and glittery decorations on the table and remarked, "I raided the dollar store. You need some festive cheer in your apartment." We drank wine, caught up, and decorated my apartment all night long. We didn't discuss the inheritance, Mom, or Travis. For a short while, everything seemed to be back to normal. Christmas Day wasn't like the formal, subdued occasions we were used to. Around midday, my pals showed up with games, food, and beverages. We probably drank more than we should have. ate a lot, and laughed aloud. It felt authentic, yet it wasn't fancy. Susan acknowledged that it was the nicest Christmas she had experienced in a long time. Later that night, however, when browsing Instagram in bed, real life manages to slink back in. Mom shared a picture, and I saw it. She was grinning in the living room next to Travis's parents. Everyone wore holiday sweaters that matched. "Very grateful to spend this special day with family," said the caption. Family? I felt like I was being sliced by just one word. I was no longer family. They no longer wanted to remember me. That night, I was unable to sleep at all. I couldn't stop thinking about that Instagram post and all the mortgage payments I'd made. I always believed that by giving them money, I was attempting to repair something and easing past grief. But now I realized the reality. I had simply been paying to feel like I belonged. My decision was made the next day. I halted the automatic payment that was going to my parents' mortgage by opening my banking app. Perhaps it was minor and resentful, but I was sick of being exploited. 14 days passed. I immersed myself in my work, appreciating the New Year's crowd that wanted to sample new restaurants. To be honest, I appreciate the job to distract me from my problems, and Pamela and I were going to open another branch. The telephone then rang. Mom was the one. A part of me still wanted to hear her voice, but I almost disregarded the call. "There's a problem with the mortgage, Lauren," she said immediately. No salutations. Without pausing. "Have you neglected to submit the payment?" I remembered. Calmly, I responded. "I stopped it." Silence fell. "You put a stop to it." Confused, she asked. "Indeed. Your mortgage will no longer be paid by me." "But we were depending on that money." Her voice rose as she sobbed. "The deadline is today. Before you ignored me in favor of your in-law's inheritance, you ought to have taken that into account." Sharply, I said. "You made a decision. Now ask them to assist you with the cost." "This has to do with Christmas," she said vehemently. "You're behaving absurdly." We explained the reason. I retorted that you said money was more important than me. I got the message. Her voice quickly shifted from one of fear to one of accusation. She yelled, "I know exactly what you did." "Even so, what are you saying? You made Susan skip Christmas. She turned against us because of you. That is untrue." I answered, perplexed. "Are you aware that I had to tell Travis's parents a falsehood?" "Susan was very ill," I said. "I had to make up a disease. It's all your fault." I looked incredulously at the phone. "This inheritance is driving you insane. Children of real parents don't pretend to have health issues. For financial gain, they do not discard their daughters." She hissed, "You have no idea what you're saying." I said, "Tell me what you've done for me lately. In addition to ignoring me and kicking me out of Christmas." She didn't say anything more before hanging up. Months went by. Mom didn't return the call. I also didn't give her a call. Susan kept in contact. Whenever she could, she stopped by. The only person from my history who hadn't harmed me was her. The only family I have left. I gave my assignment my whole attention. Pamela and I continued to develop our brand. On the opposite side of town, we built a second restaurant. The work was nice. Even though everything was going well, I still felt a void in my heart when I thought of my family. A late April evening, Susan gave a call. "Would you mind if I drop by tomorrow?" she inquired. She had a slightly odd voice, but I didn't ask. Around 12 o'clock the next afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I answered the door, Mom and Travis were standing there in addition to Susan. "What on earth?" With a gasp, I took a step back and nearly slammed the door. Susan held up both hands. "Lauren, please just listen to them." I gave them a look. Mom seemed anxious. Susan was attempting to maintain her optimism, and Travis was obviously uneasy. I could tell straight immediately that this would not be a quick conversation. They were strangers when they walked into the living room, perhaps because they were now that. Mom gripped her handbag. Travis remained silent and close to the window. Susan cleared her throat. "They want to share something with you," I said, she said. Mom took a big breath. "We come to apologize, Lauren. I made a mistake around Christmas." The first waited, but she didn't continue. "That's all?" I inquired. Travis said, "We miss you. Without you, it doesn't feel the same." "Do you mean the house?" I wasn't allowed inside. I lost my temper. The one where, when your folks are there, I disappear. I became louder, but didn't mind. "You believe it's sufficient to say you miss me?" Susan caressed my arm tenderly. "Lauren, let her continue." Mom smiled hesitantly. "You're correct. I wounded you. I made a decision. I placed gaining money above being your mom, and I regret it every day." Travis stated, "We no longer need your assistance. A better job came up for me. We are now able to manage the mortgage independently. So why have you come here? We are your family," which is why I asked. We nearly wrecked Mom's trembling voice when she responded. "For what purpose?" My husband's parents' approval, we may never receive the money. That was incorrect. I was stopped by something in her voice. I had braced myself for manipulation and guilt-tripping justifications, but not for genuine honesty. How about your parents? I questioned Travis. If they discover, will they still remove you from the will? We conversed. Travis continued to stare at his fingers. After the payments stopped, I got in touch with them, he stated quietly. I was honest with them, that I was going to stop hiding the fact that you are also my child. They became enraged, he continued. As they had previously threatened, they vowed they would take me out of their life. We got into a heated disagreement. Why did it change? I inquired. That's me, Susan remarked. I contacted Grandma and Grandpa and informed them that I was fully aware of the situation. I informed them that I supported you and your father. I warned them that they would lose me too if they didn't consider you family. Mom gave a little nod. 3 days later, they responded to us. They claimed to have calmed down and would make an effort to accept the circumstances. They don't want to take the chance of losing Susan. I was unsure of how to react. A part of me wanted to return to my family and let go of the past. But the other half remembers how readily they abandoned me when it suited them. Sincerely, I said, I'm not sure I can believe you. When it was simple, you shoved me away. What happens if they threaten you once more? That is not going to occur. Firmly, Mom said. We've established boundaries. You are our daughter. That's the end of it. Susan gave me a small nod of support when I turned to face her. I stared at Travis, who appeared more genuine than he had in a long time. Finally, I noticed a mother with tears in her eyes. I'm not saying that everything is resolved by this. I said softly, I'll give it a go, but it will take time. Mom sobbed and gave me a hug. I remained still. I wasn't ready to embrace back when she let go. Travis said something. To work through everything from the past, the four of us have begun to consider going to counseling sessions, not just the recent events. Counseling? Startled, I asked. When I was a teenager, Travis used to make fun of the therapy sessions I had to attend. Dad came up with a concept. Susan said with a proud expression. We're all carrying around unresolved past anguish, he remarked. I ought to have supported you long ago, Travis said. After what occurred with Susan's arm, I realized it wasn't really your fault, but I still let my parents teach me how to treat you. That was incorrect. I reflected on the years I'd spent attempting to live up to his expectations. I never truly needed the treatment. The monthly money transfers I made, in the hopes that they would fall in love with me that night, devolved into hours of intense and challenging discussion. We discussed earlier suffering that had not gone away. We discussed the Christmas catastrophe. We discussed the necessary steps to regain trust. Before they went, we agreed to weekly therapy sessions beginning the following month and to have regular dinners without the extended family. We established clear guidelines for acceptable and unacceptable behavior. It wasn't pardon. It was a starting point, but not quite yet. Susan lingered a little after they had gone. Like she always did, she collapsed on the couch, as if she was aware that she still belonged there. Are you feeling okay? She inquired. Sincerely, I said. I'm not sure. A part of me still expects things to go wrong again, but I also want to think they've changed. I understand, she said, fumbling with the pillow's edge. This time, though, I believe they're being serious. After Christmas, you ought to have visited your mother. She sobbed and said that she had wrecked everything. Have they asked you to make this happen? She gave a head shake. Not at all. I came up with this concept. Being in the center wore me out. I was weary of hearing people claim they missed you while doing nothing to solve it. I reclined, suddenly exhausted. Therapy won't fix everything, in my opinion. Most likely not. Susan concurred. However, it's progress, and I'll be watching closely to make sure they don't revert to their previous behaviors. I gave her a grin. My sister in real life. She picked me, not simply because of my DNA. When did you become so intelligent? I smiled a little as I asked. My instructor was excellent, she remarked, giving me a friendly shoulder bump. Even when I was a nightmare as a child, you never gave up on me. It's my turn now to persevere with this family. After Susan went later that night, I sat in the silence and pondered what second chances actually meant. What makes a family the one you strive for and the one you are born into, and how to forgive those who have failed you. I wasn't sure whether I could ever trust them again. Rebuilding trust takes time, but perhaps, just perhaps, we might use all the fragments to create something greater. As I had anticipated, our first group therapy session was tight, uncomfortable, and emotional. We had to sit in a circle and explain our desires to Dr. Emma, a lady in her 50s with a composed face and a serious demeanor. As she wiped her eyes, Mom said, I just want my family back. I would like to know why I was so easily discarded, I answered. Travis moved in his seat. I want to become a better parent for both of my kids. Susan, who constantly tries to maintain harmony, said softly, Now, I simply want everyone to talk honestly. No lie, no concealment. Dr. Emma nodded slightly. Those are reasonable hopes. Expressing your feelings is the first step, but it won't be easy. Within the next weeks, we kept attending our appointments. On some days, it seemed like progress. On other occasions, we ended ourselves fighting or sobbing. We didn't give up, though. We slowly and laboriously combed through years of unsaid suffering, pent-up resentment, and accumulated anxieties. We spoke about why, despite everything, I felt compelled to continue providing them with financial support. We discussed how Travis's parents manipulated the family by claiming the inheritance, and how the events of Christmas were the last straw for me. We started gradually mending our relationship outside of those encounters. Mom would give me a call just to chat. Travis began sending me information about restaurants he thought I may find interesting. I remained as close to Susan as ever. Our relationship has never been closer. We started, and 8 weeks later, a significant event occurred. Travis revealed something he had never talked about before. Quietly, he replied, "My parents always held money over my head. When I was growing up, they threatened to stop supporting me if I didn't behave in a certain manner. When I attempted to wed my first spouse, they said that because they didn't like her, they would not include me in the will. At that time, I resisted them, but I lost the strength when she died." That's when they began to treat Lori similarly. "Physician?" Emma asked quietly. "You reverted to your old ways." He turned to face me after nodding. "Lauren, I'm very sorry. I failed you." At that moment, something inside of me shifted. I no longer only saw Travis as the stepfather who had harmed me. For the first time, another person I saw had also been subdued, someone who had also suffered abuse, similar to me. Both of us were attempting to live. I told him, "You ought to have been better. I should too." After 3 months, we decided to test the viability of our new familial bond in the real world. My mother invited me to join her for supper at the home where I was raised. It had been before Christmas when I last entered. I was anxious when I parked in front. What if the parents of Travis stopped by? What if all of this was a lie? However, the aroma of my favorite meal, lasagna, welcomed me as soon as I entered. There were framed pictures all throughout the dining area. Images of Susan and I grinning during my college graduation, as well as old group pictures of the four of us. We hung them up again. Mom remarked, looking after me. "Both you and they belong here." It wasn't a perfect dinner. There were awkward silences and times when memories began to resurface. But all in all, it seemed like we were making progress. Travis invited me to accompany him after we had completed our meal. Pointing to some files on his desk, he led me into his personal office. "What is this?" I inquired. "I've been working with an attorney," he stated. "This ensures that everything I leave for you and Susan will remain unchanged, even if there are issues with the inheritance. Both of you will receive equal portions." Unsure of what to say, I just stared at him. "It's not about the money," he said hastily. "Lauren, it's about demonstrating that you are my daughter, not by blood, but by nothing but decision. That will never be changed by my parents or their wealth." I didn't usually cry, but as I drove back that evening, my eyes began to well up with tears. I took up the phone when I arrived home and dialed Susan. As I told her the whole tale, I continued. "You won't guess what just happened." "I think so," she said. "It's been a while since Dad fixed the will. He wanted you to have the perfect fit. How did things become so completely flipped?" Thinking aloud, I asked. Susan responded, "The moment you stood your ground, it changed. You showed them that they couldn't insult you and yet depend on your aid. They realized what they were about to lose as a result." She was entirely correct. By separating myself from them, financially and emotionally, I gave them a choice. They picked me, which is shocking. "Doctor, during the next therapy session, Emma asked us to discuss the most important things we had discovered. I said, I've come to the realization that I can't make people act differently. I can choose how I react, though. To feel appreciated, I don't have to continue to give my all, both financially and emotionally." Travis looked at his mother and remarked, "I have discovered that I married a courageous woman, and she raised an even bolder daughter, and that I put off confronting my parents for much too long." Mom said, "I now realize that belonging to a family isn't just based on blood or obligation. Every day, we each make this choice." Susan grinned. "I discovered that my sister is powerful and has had enough of being trampled underfoot." That made us all chuckle. Half a year after the traumatic Christmas that nearly tore us apart, the four of us sat down together for a lunch at a new restaurant. I had just launched for business. I had a profound insight while we sat at that table, laughing and reminiscing about the past. We were no longer the same bunch. The foundation of that previous iteration of our family was shame, quiet, and dread. It felt different now. We weren't flawless, no. Even yet, there were difficult days. Travis's parents were still there. Even though they had remained amazingly silent since we made peace, they were still present. Sometimes the old agony returned, but this time we were dealing with it together. In all honesty, that was the decisive factor.